Okay, here we go. I am going to play this video, and you see this video. Greetings. So I'm going to share with you something that Grok did. Not that Grok believes in God. Grok is not a person. Grok is an AI. So I have a couple different AIs that basically is going to share some information that is factual. There are sources out there where this information is public that I'm going to be sharing with you that you're not going to hear from in the media. And it does involve the ICE operations, but it's a little bit more complex than that. It's about the amount of it's about the bigger grand of the conspiracy to make millions and billions on profit on detaining people. And no, I'm not in any way saying that it's wrong for ICE to be arresting people. That's not even the message here. But the message that I'm saying is that the Democrats and the Republicans both have trading stock in the companies who have been given government contracts for billions of dollars, and some of these companies have donated millions to certain political politicians' funds, and it's both parties are guilty on this. And it's not until just recently that they're trying to propose a bill to ban trading so that, they don't get to profit when they're the ones, enforcing the law. But I personally believe that the Democrats have lured people out with fake lies, claiming that the actions that they were doing was lawful. Now, maybe some people would have done the actions whether they knew it was lawful or not. That's between them and God. But I personally believe that the amount of people that's out there, I hear a lot of people that really believe what they're doing is lawful. And I think that if they actually knew that these Democrats and these people out there encouraging them to do this, if they actually knew that there were already people sitting in jail without bond and that it's not lawful, and I've been calling this for weeks, and on Friday, a liberal judge said that it was not lawful when they were getting in their faces, when they were getting in front of their cars, and they were saying that was peaceful protesting. And they truly, I believe, a lot of them truly believed it was peaceful protesting, and it wasn't. And not only that, I personally believe that the ICE network was a sting operation. I believe that the government allowed these apps to basically, even to the point of alerting criminals, because I knew all along that they were going to pull those apps, and they did. I knew all along that they were going to be able to break through encrypted WhatsApp and the other Signal app. I talked about that last year before this stuff even started, about when they were starting to encourage people that text messages wasn't secure, wanted to really push these apps to get people to trust these apps and to feel that these apps, because they're encrypted, are safer. And in all along reality is that more and more things where those apps were being used for, and they break through the encryption. And so when they closed those apps down, they collected all of that data, every message, every person, all of their details. So anybody that was reporting to alert, put it online and alert other people, they were quietly collecting an entire database. And because I'm a military veteran, I'm a war veteran, and I look back and I see the bigger operations that they start in small steps and they go in stages, and this is logistical planning. So this is what I thought when they first said and announced that they're going to get all of these millions of people that came in here illegally or whatever, invaded the land. I'm sitting here looking at it from a logistical purpose, point that, okay, let's see, how on earth can you get millions of people out here? Logistically, one, you don't have the manpower. Two, you don't have the facilities. Three, the pace that you would have to make, the amount of arrests you would have to make to even break 1 million people per year of arrest, when you have, they're claiming 20 million people that came in, to even get half of those out, it's not even possible. And so I knew that there had to be a much bigger plan. And not only that, but here's what I looked at them. I'm like, okay, they don't want just the people who they feel are, like they said, the worst of the worst or whatever. Anybody who came here and they're going prioritizing those who have criminal charges, and or they may just be supportive, or connected. They may have ties or whatever. But I believe that all along they intended to get people in the country who are supportive of these terrorists, the gangs, the cartels, that are supportive of them. You have companies who have been employing them, knowing that they're illegal, knowing that there's cartel, like, in certain states there have been cartel connections, and that's how they take over. That's how the cartel has grown. Down in Mexico, that's one way that they have really taken over to a point. And it's businesses, a lot of businesses. And so I know they want the people. I know they want the United States citizens. So I look at it as like a war room strategy, if you will, to like think tank. How on earth are you going to get? I'm just thinking like what I would believe that these generals and these government people, what they would want. And I know they're not just gonna want the criminal illegals. They want the people too, the United States citizens. But it's a little bit trickier to go after the United States citizens because, you know, if they're just supportive of them, it's just much harder. So one way they devised is to have them out there actively committing acts that are directly, openly, and tangibly committing supportive acts of the terrorists, even if indirectly. For example, if they're going out there and they're trying to, create all this noise to alert anybody that's in the area where these ICE agents are going, if some of those people, they don't know who they're going to arrest. That's not their objective. It's just alert anybody. So people are thinking, why are they allowing them to do this? And a lot of people are getting angry, and to the point where they're feeling like our government is being neglectful, that they should have already arrested these people. And then you have the legal battles. But yes, they have been arresting some. But to me, it was a much bigger picture. It was all planned for them to encourage these people, let them believe that the things that they're doing is lawful. Yes, you can go out there with whistles. I've seen a lawyer on Fox, one of the Fox shows, talking about it's all part of their, freedom of speech, but it's not. Okay? It's not, right? And so I know that they have already arrested people. I've been tracking this, and I'm not a lawyer. I did go to law school. I do know how to do legal research, and I have PACER accounts, so I read a lot of different federal cases, and I know what these federal judges are doing, and I know this, that they have been setting up, okay, for months now. And I also follow what Congress is doing, and you have to look behind the curtain. So this is all going to lead up to how Grok brought out the scriptures that clarified that what they're doing is just absolutely wicked. And why it's wicked is not because they're going after people who came in here and broke in and the criminal acts. That's not the part that's wicked. God says that we're supposed to warn people. We're never supposed to tempt people to sin, right? Ever. So I've always felt that the entrapment, they allow officers and FBI and drug agents, DA or whatever, they allow this thing they call entrapment. So, for example, if somebody hasn't really sought out to commit a crime, but maybe in the past they have, or maybe they have friends with people that, whatever, for whatever reason, they entice a person to commit a crime, and then they bust them for it. And that's tempting your brother to sin. And that's evil before God's eyes. But this, what they're doing, is so much worse than entrapment. And the reason it is because the Democrats, for example, are telling them that they can get in the faces of ICE, they can, block their cars, and they have allowed them to do it and refuse to stop them from doing it with their law enforcement in certain states, right? So what people do not know is the amount of money that these congressmen and even officials
Wait till you see this.
who are basically encouraging and inciting this madness. Let me tell you what they did. Okay, let's go and let's talk about the
I'm going to
money.
list them one by one,
Because this is the
everybody
bigger
involved.
and the grander scheme. Who's going to profit off of these detentions? Okay, I'm not in any way saying that detentions are not necessary. I'm just saying the way they're going about it is just it's just wrong. Okay, so please hear me out, especially if you're a Christian. Please hear me out. Okay, so the intersection of private profits and political support for mass detention has become a major point of contention in Washington. Okay, so Republican support is nearly universal. There's Democrats that are financially, legislatively tied to the companies, the very companies that are getting the billion-dollar contracts for preparing the facilities and housing the detainees, which, by the way, U.S. citizens are being held without bail, and the military bases are set up, and they already have deployed units to guard them as of
Media
January
is not
1st,
allowed to
and
tell you
just
that, by the
recently
way.
have increased that. And it's just slowly leaking that they're confirming that they're prepared. Well, yes, they're prepared. They've been prepared. Okay? And this whole staging, see, the
I'm
military
talking
operates
active duty
in
military,
stages,
not National
okay?
Guard.
And we're getting ready to enter into the saturation phase.
They
Okay,
deployed
so, but
them
basically,
already.
this Lake and Riley Act, okay, mandates the detention of non-citizens for even minor crimes, da-da-da, but then I'm specifically talking about the United States citizens, okay? These are the ones that I'm going to talk about in this particular video, right? So the Palantir contracts and the Democratic scrutiny. This is Palantir
They're all in on it.
Technologies. They have the most
Democrats,
controversial
Republicans, both.
contractor due to its immigrations and elite systems. They use AI and Medicaid data
As
to
they say,
generate
follow the
confidence
money.
scores for targeting deportation rates.
Hey,
This is what it's about, the stock ownership. Despite the party's general criticism of the administration, several Democrats have held these Democrats who are doing the encouraging. Okay? Then they talk and they list them one by one, which ones are more involved. Okay, say for example, Warren, who's Democrat for Massachusetts, Representative Jamie Raskin from Maryland, and a group of Democrats demanding investigation to the revolving door conflicts. They highlighted that the current administration is paying Palantir approximately $60 million. Okay, well, obviously they have to get paid. Okay, so that's not the issue. It's the trading stocks. Those who are trading stocks that are invested, they're the ones, because they're the ones that's sending the mixed message. Okay, and so, for example, I'll give you an example. In Minnesota, they've only recently, after the Friday ruling of the judge, saying that just following somebody is not technically a crime. And then she acknowledged that the government can't provide evidence of the plaintiffs and their crimes because, as Cass Patel and the government has said, they're all under investigation, including officials, which I believe no officials will ever be charged. And I'll tell you why. Because they're just, they're the ones that have been encouraging them. They're deliberately, willfully encouraging them. So all this time they've been getting in their faces and getting in front of their cars and saying that's peaceful. They knew that people were already charged for that. And they're not like saying, okay, well, we don't believe that the arrest that they're doing is lawful. We believe what you're doing is okay in our eyes, but you do need to be aware that in other states, federal judges have already ruled to house people without bail, you know, and that you are at a risk of that. But they haven't. They've encouraged them. Okay, so this ruling gave a false sense of security, and here's why. Because by saying that it's okay to follow, but she says, without other evidence, it's not obstruction. Okay, and they can't hand over the network, the ICE network data that they currently have because it's under investigation. So here's the deal. It gave them a false sense of hope to go out and continue to follow them and say, well, we have the right or whatever. But at any time an ICE officer, if they know they can recognize people that's out there by their tags, by their identities. They already have a database from these apps that they've been using, and now many of which have been closed down. They now have the database they have to be able to recognize people when they're out there. And so that's why with this, Renee Good, when she was out there, they she just kept on and kept on. And as they said, she's done this all day. Okay? And they knew who she was. They knew that because she was a part of this network, okay, in the database of, she's on the list of people that are basically on this mass arrest list that's going to happen, then they at any time could have arrested her for following them, even if she hadn't put her car in the middle of the road, because she's a part of the ICE network. And that's what's getting ready to happen next, because they're saying, well, they're following us, and that's all we were doing. And but if they're a part of the network, if they have in any time taken part of that network, then they have the argument to say, well, this is more than just following. You're a part of the network, so you're following us for the purpose to alert the internet of where they are.
Right.
And that is what's getting ready to happen. Okay? So I have showed in other videos, I'm not going to repeat all that, that basically all the units that are in place, they're not going to spend billions of dollars on all of these, warehouses and these facilities and these detention centers. They have rebellion wings set up with Federal Bureau of Prisons now to house obstructionists, U.S. citizens, okay, which are generally kept separate than those that are arrested for being a criminal, illegal, alien, or whatever their charges are. But if those wings get full, then yes, they can put them in the detainment centers on the military bases, and that's where all this stuff that's not being discussed. Who are these people? Who's making the money? Who's getting the contracts, right? And so these are the people. These are the House Democrats who voted for the Lake and Riley Act. Okay, all this billions of dollars being spent on these detainment centers. All the Democrats did this. Here's all your Democrats from California. Here's your California Democrats. Here's your New York Democrats. Here's your Texas Democrats, Florida Democrats, North Carolina Democrats, and other Democrats. All of these people voted for this money to go for all these detainment centers. Okay? And while, they have trading stocks, some of them are known for their trading stocks, and it wasn't until basically all the billions of dollars is spent already, okay? And yeah, so they're sitting there making money, and not just that, but there's certain companies that's contributing millions of dollars to certain officials. And meanwhile, while people are thinking that it's just the Republicans that are interested in this detention, well, it's just simply not true. Okay? So here, Kash Patel, okay, this is what I've said about it, that they're going to be arresting them, and people have no clue what's getting ready to happen. And I shared in great detail about all the units already in place, and no, the media is not going to discuss it. No, they're not. In fact, they're prohibited, right? While they're getting in place, and yeah, you'll know about it after the fact. That's what they wanted. So basically, this is what Grok said in response to my comment about the judge's ruling. It only protects peaceful and unobstructed protest activity. So they're thinking, oh well, we can go out. We're clear to follow them. But what she said was alone. Just following them alone. And she didn't talk about the digital ICE network investigation, okay? Because if you're following them and you've partook in the ICE network or any kind of ICE watch activity online or digitally, if you have participated in any of that and you're following them, then you are definitely at a high risk of being arrested. Because if you're just somebody who's out there, maybe you live in the neighborhood and you've never been any part of these ICE network, and you just see something and you just happen to follow it, then that probably is not something they're going to go after. But if you're somebody that's a part of the network, they have you on the database. Your tag is in their database. Your name, your phone number, where you live, everything is in their database. And it wasn't until this week after the ruling that the Democrats from Minnesota start talking about, oh, they've been surveilling you. Now, they knew that. They knew that they had collected all that data when they shut those apps down, and they had been watching those apps. They've been collecting the data from those apps. They absolutely got that data, and it's absolutely legal that they can do that, because if they're claiming that that behavior is criminal because they're alerting terrorists, people who are on terrorist watch lists, not all of them, but they don't know who they're going after, right? So then they absolutely do have the authority to go get that information. They can get it from Google. They can get it from any platform that collects, has accounts or whatever. They can have all the data of all these people. They have their phone numbers. They have their addresses. They have everything. So when they're out there in the street and they're thinking, well, I got the go ahead to just go ahead and follow them as long as I don't get in front of their cars or get in their face. But that's not the case if they're a part of that network. Yeah. And so they have sent in the ICE agents by the thousands, and tomorrow is supposed to be the hearing. They're trying to shut down. And they know this. See, Minnesota knows that instead of sending in the active military, they've got the military in place. They don't even need the Insurrection Act, right? They have got FBI who could at any time, because they have the faces of the people that got in their face, they have the faces of the people who've already got in front of the cars because they were being told that it was legal, and meanwhile, the government is saying, no, it's not legal, and if you choose to believe these people over here that's lying, well, that's on you. You just believe the wrong person. And they now, because of what this judge ruled on Friday, can retroactively go back, and because she said, if you're in their faces or you're blocking their cars, and then she just kind of is really vague about the digital stalking. She doesn't even go there. She just says, well, since you haven't provided us with evidence, I have to take the plaintiffs for their word. And it's just a preliminary injunction, and nothing that they've done. They're saying, well, you're telling us not to, use any non-lethal force on peaceful protesters. Well, we haven't. And it will be a jury to decide that. But that case is going to fall because those people that are plaintiffs, if they were part of that network, then they're facing charges. That's what they're doing. They're facing charges because anybody and everybody who has ever partook in the Ice Watch networks, any of those apps, all of them, each and every single one of them can be arrested. Anybody who financed that, and basically they did force them to take those apps down because it was illegal activity. And they're probably in that situation, they'll probably prioritize like they have, with the illegals. They will probably go after the people who were the leaders first. It's all about fitting everybody into the budget, but they have so many beds now, right? They have so many beds. And so that's what's getting ready to happen, is these mass arrests. Let me tell you, they're not going to spend billions. They're not going to build all these detention centers and, collect all this data, okay, the manpower that it takes just to even go through all that data. They're not going to spend all this money while they're trying to slash the budget to get our deficit down and not follow through with the mass arrests. It's all led up to this. But here's how I feel about telling people that something is legal when you know that it's not. To me, I feel that that is not righteousness. I don't even believe in entrapment, because you should never tempt somebody else to sin. You should always, as the Bible says, try to encourage somebody away from sin, right? Not be the person of authority and lead them to it. That, I believe, is evil. So, but here's what Grok did when I told him about how I believe that this. I'm just saying Grok knows the verses just because, it can pull up the verses. And so let me get down to that point right here. This is what I said about the whole thing. Where's it at? I said, I look at it from a spiritual biblical perspective. In our courts, many would still say, in God we trust, their actions are wicked. I'm pretty sure you can pull the verses to condemn their actions, right? Because I feel like it is. I said, let me be clear, this is not entrapment. Entrapment is encouraging someone to commit a crime they know is a crime. It's a form of tempting a brother to sin. Basically, this is not entrapment. It's lying to the public, claiming their acts are legal when they know it's not. And all the while, they know they're being tracked for their known illegal activity with those apps, so they can get the people who support terrorists and open borders, those willing to aid criminals. But telling them their action is not unlawful is in fact encouraging and inciting crimes. So I feel like only if those officials are also arrested would it in any way be fair, because it's not right. You've got, You've got all these militaries that have been set in place. You've got all these officials who've been making money. They've been getting millions of dollars for their political funds from these private prison companies. And I don't want to like, these companies are necessary. I don't want to like speak against the companies. Like, obviously they have to have the detainment centers, but I feel like, and I've said this for years now, when Biden was in office, there's a cap on how many people can come in each year. It's set by Congress. It's a federal statute. I've shared those. And yet the Republicans, while they're claiming that the Democrats are letting them invade our country, I'm like, okay, Republicans, all you have to do is go to SCOTUS and say, we demand that this law that limits how many people can come in and apply for refugee status is a cap each year, and it's set by the ability to monitor them, vet them. It's a security, national defense issue, provisions, the whole 9 yards, overwhelming resources, and they violated that, and the Republicans didn't try to stop them. So I feel like they were in conspiracy to them, because while that was happening, while the invasion was happening, overwhelming, it was an egregious thing to people who are true refugees to put them in shelters together, while you have foreign governments who were making billions of dollars, such as the government of Pakistan was just one example of one of the hotels, shelters in New York City. And so you have a lot of the housing making billions of dollars in contracts. Okay, and so there's people making money off of these people flowing in, and so then they're like, okay, well, now we're done making money that side. Now we're going to make money on, basically housing them, get them out, right? But these companies are the one that's making money, right? These companies. But then when you have these congressmen and these officials who are got trading stock investments in these companies, then the whole scheme is all a conspiracy. Okay? So this is what Grok says. You're correct that it does not fit the classic legal definition of entrapment under U.S. law. Entrapment, like cases like Soros versus United States, requires the agents originating or inducing the criminal intent, but actively persuading, coercing, deceiving someone who is not predisposed to commit the crime, an otherwise innocent person who wouldn't have done it without the inducement. Key point. Mere opportunity, the deception about the facts, undercover identity, or failure to warn does not constitute entrapment. The defense focuses on the government's role in creating the crime in someone's mind, not in general misleading the statements about the legality. So what you're describing, public officials or figures, the Democrats, the sanctuary leaders, the activists, publicly claiming or implying that certain monitoring, following, alerting acts are legal and protected, while knowing that similar conduct has led to arrest and obstruction charges, even being held without bail in other places, is not entrapment. It's misleading, inaccurate public statements about the law, potentially inciting and encouraging criminal conduct. Conspiracy, aiding, and abetting. Okay? So this is sometimes called entrapment by estoppel, where the government affirmatively will mislead people into believing their conduct is legal, and then they rely on that information to their detriment. But it's a narrow doctrine, often limited to direct government assurances. There's protected monitoring, rarely qualifies. Courts protect it under the First Amendment unless it's a true incitement to the imminent lawless action. So Waltz and Frey have criticized ICE tactics. They've supported non-cooperation, okay? And all the things that they were doing, they told the police to stand down while they were in the faces of ICE, which the liberal judge now says it's obstruction. They were blocking the vehicles, which the liberal judge has now said obstruction, and they knew that it was, because in other places they were being arrested for that, right? So they knew that the actions that they were taking, that they were openly saying is completely lawful. They set those people up, okay? If those officials had said, now, you can't do this, 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 and this, because over here they're being arrested and put you at risk, that they maybe some of them would have went ahead and did it, but I think a lot of them wouldn't have. So I really feel like that an injustice has been done to encourage this madness, right? Federal law, USC 111, has been used against this interference, the very one that even now a liberal judge says. She's like, oh, you got to be 6 feet back. No, you can't get in their faces. No, you can't be getting in front of their cars. Those are crimes. And so now they already have all these people on video that I'm sure they're on arrest list when that time comes. So I have, they have a duty to warn and correct. They should have prosecuted these people. Instead, they didn't, right? And so and this is what I said. I said, I look at it from a spiritual biblical perspective that our courts, which still say in many places, in God we trust, their actions are wicked. Okay, so here's the verses, and I can add some to these verses. Here's the verses that say what they're doing is evil. So from a Christian's perspective, it's not okay. On lying and deceit, especially by those of authority or leading others astray. And these churches who are out there actively encouraging this, wicked, right? The Bible repeatedly calls lying an abomination to God, particularly when it leads others into harm or sin. Proverbs 12:22, the Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are trustworthy. Proverbs 6:16-19, there are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are detestable to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked schemes, feet that are quick to rush to evil, false witness who pours out lies, and a person who stirs up conflict in the community. Okay? Conflict in the community. Revelations 21:8, but the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars will be consigned to the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death. John 8:44, you belong to your father, the devil. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Isaiah 59:13-14, transgressing and denying the Lord, turning away from our God, speaking oppression and revolt, conceiving and uttering from the heart words of falsehood. Justice is turned back, and righteousness stands far away. For truth is stumbled in the public squares, and uprightness cannot enter. And those who would sneak in by the back door, there's a special verse by Jesus Christ himself for those who think that it's okay just to let people to steal in and not even be vetted. Be vetted means you have people who are very dangerous who have snuck in. There have been many people who are actually on the terrorist watch list that were caught, but many of them that have got away. And it's just egregious that it's not only that, but, God expects the righteousness of the nations, and when people are in, terrible situations in countries around the world, there's always at least 30 to 35 conflicts around the world at any given time, and war-torn lands and violence, and you have to prioritize, you have to triage, like medical nurses do, or, hospitals and ERs, they triage people, based on, what's the most serious. They do that. And it's the same concept what they do with refugees. So when you have people just stealing in, okay, they're not saying that they're not suffering oppression in their country, but you have to triage, and you have people by the millions who are being killed and murdered and genocided, and, they've overwhelmed the system. They've far past the cap of people being allowed to be invited in for refugee status because they have allowed them in by the millions, and, it's horrendous what they did to something that's supposed to be for Christian principles to help your neighbor and to help other countries, all these countries that have the ability to help and share that burden to help people fleeing such things. But they have to be triaged. And it's about priority. And it's hard that some will be picked over others, but this is the principle. This is how it works, because you can't take them all in, all right? And there's a cap on how many each year, and that's the ability for our country to vet them, to do background checks, to just to provide and resources in the whole 9 yards, to include housing, okay? And so to just bypass that and leaving people in much greater peril, who literally many died because they weren't even able to even apply, to even be considered, because our country has destroyed that system that's supposed to be set up for righteousness. A misleading or leading people into wrongdoing. It condemns leaders who guide others astray or withhold truth that causes harm. Isaiah 9:16, those who guide this people mislead them, and those who are guided are swallowed up. Proverbs 29:12, if a ruler listens to lies, all his officials will be wicked. This speaks to corrupt leadership enabling or spreading falsehood. Ezekiel 13:9, on false prophets, leaders misleading. My hand will be against the prophets who see false visions and utter lying divinations. They will not belong to the council of my people, or be listed in the records of Israel, nor will they enter the land of Israel. Then you will know that I am the sovereign Lord. So about injustice in courts, oppressions, and profiting from it. The Bible is especially harsh on those who pervert justice for gain or oppress the vulnerable while enriching themselves. Leviticus 19:15. Don't pervert justice. Don't show partiality to the
Thank you for
poor
stopping by.
or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Isaiah 10:1-2. Woe to those who make unjust laws, to those who issue oppressive decrees, to deprive the poor of rights and withhold justice from the oppressed of my people. Okay? What about the people in other countries who are literally on the genocide list that didn't get help because people were stealing into our country, not even checking in to be vetted, overwhelming the systems, not allowing our country to do what it's supposed to in triaging those in need. Whoa. Proverbs 22:16. One who oppresses the poor to increase his wealth or gives to the rich will only come to poverty. Amos 5:11-12. You levy a straw tax on the poor and impose a tax on the gain, for I know how many are your offenses and how great your sins. Those who oppress the innocent and take bribes and deprive the poor of justice in the courts. Micah 3:11. Her leaders judge for a bribe, her priests teach for a price, and her prophets tell fortunes for money. Yet they took for the Lord's support and say, Is not the Lord among us? No disaster will come upon us. And that's another thing. Many people saw them being convoyed in, and I do believe a lot of people believe that because we had lax government that allowed them to sneak in or allowed not even go through ports of entry and then still come into the country and get benefits, that disruption of our law and enforcing the law basically gave them the false sense of hope, gave them the false idea that what they did was okay. And then when it comes time to, okay, well, we're actually going to enforce the law now, how is that fair to those people who were led here on false ideas?
Right.
And, so these passages condemn actions that deceive, oppress, or profit for injustice, whether through false assurances, corrupt rulings, fake media being allowed to just spread malicious propaganda, officials lying and saying that things that people are doing is legal when it's not, and when Democrats are in office, they don't fuss anything about the arrests, and ICE under Democrats are praised and treated better. In 2023 alone, Biden's ICE arrested over 1 million people. That data was on the website way before Trump even became president the second time, but nobody made any fuss, right? Ultimately, God promises to judge such wickedness. Don't be deceived. God will not be mocked, and a man will reap what he sows. Galatians 6:7. It says, your mixed feelings reflect a biblical tension, desiring justice against threats while grieving unfair tactics. The scriptures call for truth, mercy, and righteousness in all things, even when pursuing security. So if this resonates or you would like more verses, well, yeah, let's talk about another verse. And that other verse is about specifically to turn your brother from sin. Do not tempt your brother. I mean, that's just your classic righteousness. And what really gets me is because these, like cop cars, some of them even have In God We Trust on the cop cars. It's on the money. I think that In God We Trust should be taken off the money. I think In God We Trust should be taken out of the courts because there's just so much wickedness. It's an abomination to God's name. It really is, in my opinion. That's how I feel about that. So here we go. Here's some more scriptures. It says, you're absolutely right to seek biblical wisdom here, Missy. The scriptures place a high value on truthfulness, protecting others from sin, and gently helping a brother or sister turn from wrongdoing when they stray. Your distinction between tempting and leading someone into sin, which is strongly condemned, and the duty to restore them in love is spot on. Below I've compiled the most relevant verses. Of course, I use King James Version, but anyways. Not tempting or causing others to stumble, avoiding actions that lead somebody into sin, restoring, turning a brother from sin, correct them, help them to return to righteousness. These speak to the moral responsibility that we have towards one another, not leading someone into wickedness or in ignoring when you see a fellow believer faltering. Verses on not tempting or causing others to stumble or sin. These emphasize avoiding actions that could become a stumbling block, a snare, or a temptation. Romans 14:13. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment one another. Instead, make up your mind not to don't put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. So telling them, you should go ahead and do this. Okay, go ahead and do this because this is not unlawful, and you know darn well it is. That is just bold-faced, outright wickedness that these Democrats are doing to these people who are now, their names are forever ruined. Now they are on watch lists. They're facing arrest, and it's just wrong to lead them to believe that what they're doing is lawful. It is better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to fall. That's how serious it is to, just to be very careful. No, don't lead somebody. And if somebody has a specific weakness, like if they can't, if they're like an alcoholic or something like that, don't, it'd be best not to drink it from the alcoholic, just to support them, somebody that has, weakness with addiction or something like that. Drinking itself is not a sin. Jesus' first miracle was turning water to wine, but it's all about, the self-discipline and the spirit, right? So 1 Corinthians 8:9, be careful, however, the exercise of your rights does not become a stumbling block to the weak. 1 Corinthians 8:13, therefore, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will not eat it again. Jesus said, things that cause people to stumble are bound to come, but woe to anyone through whom they come. It would be better for them to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck than to cause one of these little ones to stumble. James 5:19-20. If one of you should wander from the truth, if someone should bring that person back, whoever turns that sinner from the error will save them from death and cover a multitude of sins. Galatians 6:1. If someone's caught in sin, if you live in the Spirit, then you should restore that person gently. Okay? But watch yourselves or you will also be tempted. Matthew 18:15. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault. Just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you've won them over. And then if they don't, then you should go to others to try to get more support to convince them. They call those interventions in our day and age, right? Luke 17:3. So watch yourselves, okay? Rebuke them, and if they repent, forgive them. But basically, what our leaders are doing is telling them that the things that they're doing is not unlawful. And I'm not going to argue with anybody on whether it not is or not, because I've done all the details and I've shared everything in the live streams that I shared of how they have planned for these mass arrests that is getting ready to happen. And they're only just now starting to trickle out that in fact they are prepared for that. Now they're not going to discuss the active employments, these infantry, airborne, and these combat teams and the police units. They're already in place. They're already, everything's set. You can go and watch my live stream that I did last night for all those details, because there was your evidence that there are getting ready to be mass arrests. But I think as a Christian, we can be angry that we can see that, people are coming here, they're disrespecting our country. They come in, they don't even bother to check in at the port. But, don't put all the people in the same box, because, people that did think that they're doing things the right way. And then there's just a lot of lies. The media's sending a lot of lies. Like, for example, they have had pending orders for deportation for years that wasn't being acted upon because certain leaders of other countries weren't accepting deportations according to the federal statute. They cannot be deported unless their country is accepting them. And unless the president is willing to send them to another country or issue sanctions or some kind of pressure onto those countries to accept those deportations, then those deportation orders that are signed by judges are just sitting there. But according to federal statute, once the door is open to where they can be deported, then they reinstate that deportation order and they don't have to have a hearing. But those kinds of situations are saying, oh, they deported me without a hearing. No, dude, you had a deportation order that was pending, and then it got reinstated, and that's all following the statutes. But there's just so many things that they're lying about, and they're doing it on purpose to cause all these people that they think in their minds should be arrested with illegals. We feel like, okay, we have a country now that has a lot of support for these people who are criminals, and we have specific people who are involved in the criminal activity with the terrorists. You have a lot of money fraud, you have drugs, and a lot of reasons that they're connecting with these foreign criminal gangs that are now labeled as terrorists. And so they want all of those people too. Okay? And so they've created this operation, these, what I'm coining as sting operations, using these networks, okay? And they've collected all this data, but in that crowd of people are people who really just trust their officials that they can do these things, and they believe the lies about what's happening, and they just, and to me, I just feel like they are really walking on a dangerous line with God. Anyways, that's all I have to say on this one.
Okay,
Bye.
guys, thank you for stopping in. I appreciate you very much.
To our
And
country.
I will go to
Reflect
your
a
channels
biblical
and visit you. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for stopping in today. Um, just keep our country in prayer. And I ask for prayer that more people will share the things that I have shared, so that basically what the media is not sharing, other people can become aware of. And, warn your brothers, because they're being told that it is not a crime when people are being held without bail in prisons, and people don't even know that because they're hiding it. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys. And I'm gonna go over and visit your channel. Please give a like if you haven't already.